Hello everyone, Tina here. I hope you're having a great Mother's Day weekend. To all you mothers out there, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Happy Mother's Day. Today I get to share with you part 2 of the 10 cards I'm making with the Simon Says Stamp May 2019 card kit. If you missed part 1, I'll link it at the end of the video for you. So we're going to start off by making a pretty simple card. I'm taking this beautiful pattern paper. This came with a Moto Scrap 6x6 papers that came with the kit, and I'm trimming down a panel. The right side here is 3 inches wide, and I wanted to keep that butterfly intact on the left side of my pattern paper here. I'm going to also trim down this pattern paper. This is the double-sided sheet. I really like that toned down tan color. I'm going to adhere this pattern directly to that toned down panel here. I think those colors are just gorgeous. Next, we're going to take our card base. I'm going to go ahead and adhere this panel directly down the center. For these 5 cards, I did bring in my own white cardstock. I actually spilt my coffee on the cardstock that came in the kit, and so I brought in just some plain white cardstock. Okay, once that's adhered, I'm going to use my scissors and I'm going to fussy cut out that little butterfly. There's only one in that pattern paper, and so I thought we'd fussy cut that out. But we're going to add some twine around the seam of the polka dot pattern on the very bottom. That just kind of helps with the transition between the polka dots and also the floral pattern, which is gorgeous. I just love these watercolor looked papers. Once the twine that I'm using is a natural color, so I think it goes really well with the print. Okay, here's my butterfly. We're going to fussy cut that out. And I did leave a little bit of a white border only because I wanted to cut out the antennae too, so the border helped with that. I'm going to add a small piece of foam tape behind my butterfly, and we'll place this on our card base right above the bow. Lovely. Now we're going to stamp our sentiment. I'm going to stamp directly on my card base. I'm using Memento Rich Cocoa ink. I chose the sentiment here that says thanks for always being there. I am going to take a brown Copic marker and color in the word thanks. This is just going to make it stand out because I did stamp over that printed area in the background. Very simple card, but those papers I think just speak for themselves. Once I have my brown added to the inside of my thanks, we're going to add a little sparkle with some Nuvo glitter drops. These are White Blizzard. I'm going to go over the word thanks, and I'm also going to fill in the butterfly body and the antennae. Give that little image some sparkle. And then for my background, I'm going to add little dots of glitter all over, filling in some open areas to bring up some sparkle. And that finishes off card number 6. And again, if you missed part 1, I'll link it at the end of the video for you guys to check out. Now we're going to move along to card number 7. We're going to do some stamping. We're going to stamp this beautiful floral image. I think of all the flowers in the stamp set, this one is my favorite. I'm stamping it twice on some Canson XL watercolor cardstock. And I'm also going to take this leaf image and stamp it 3 times. I'm going to go over my panel with some gold embossing powder. For most all of my images for this month's kit, I stamped on watercolor cardstock, and then I heat embossed with some gold embossing powder, and then I did some watercoloring on my images with my distress inks. I'm just going to melt that embossing powder, and now we're going to color in our images. I only did one just to save a little bit of time, but I'm using this color here is Festive Berries, and I'm also using tea dye. Starting off with the Festive Berries, I'm just adding a little bit of water to thin it out, and I'm going to color in my flower, and then I'm going to add a little bit more of the Festive Berries, but this time I'm going to bring in some of that tea dye and mix them both together just to create a richer color and a little bit of shadow on my floral image. And I did that with both of them. I actually let it dry and repeated the process to get a real rich, intense color. And then I did color in the leaves. I used Twisted Citron and then Mowed Lawn. And I did add a little bit of tea dye to that just to tone down those bright colors. Okay, for my background, we're going to do some ink smishing with the same colors we used for our flowers. This is tea dye, and then we're going to add a little bit of the festive berries. I just swished it with my paintbrush, that way the colors are a little bit more blended. Just press a piece of watercolor cardstock over it, and then I'll use my heat gun and go ahead and dry that. And then I just dabbed it in the color that was left over on my mat. And then we're going to do the same thing with a little bit more picked raspberry. I want some pink in this background. Okay, once our panel is done, kind of looks like coffee. Kind of looks like what my cardstock looked like after I spilled my coffee on it. Okay, I went ahead and die cut out my panel. My panel size is 3.5 inches by 4 3/4. Now I did already, I didn't stamp my sentiment just yet, but I'm adding foam tape behind the panel, and then I'm going to place my panel on my card base. I wanted that open white area towards the top, and then here's where I went in and stamped my sentiment that says thinking of you. I thought we would add a little bit more splatter using some darker brown ink. I believe this is walnut stain, and I just added some water to it and then did a little bit of flicking with my paintbrush, and then I did try to dry it with my heat gun, but it was taking a little bit too long, so I'm just going to dab off the excess, and it's going to leave a less intense color, but still looks really neat. That little dot that I'm adding next to the thinking of you was a stamping error. I misstamped it, so I just tried to cover it up with some of that walnut stain ink and it worked out pretty good. I stamped my sentiment with some Memento Rich Cocoa ink. Now I had one little spot there that hit my white cardstock, and it just stood out, so I'm going to cover that up with my leaves. And then I did pop up both my flowers, but the leaves I didn't. I'll adhere those with my my glue a little bit later. I'm going to separate this little set of leaves and do a little tucking. Lovely. And we'll place this up right next to our sentiment. And then for bells and whistles, for this card, I'm going to bring in some clear droplets. I think it went really well with that smushed background. And I'm just going to add a few here and there, just attaching them with my glue, and that finishes off that card. I think this is one of my favorites because I love the colors. I love the brown and the corals. Almost corals, but super pretty. Now we're going to move along to card number 8. For this card, we are going to do some embossing using this embossing folder. Now this folder is part of a Simon kit that was from way back when. I believe it was 2016. But I just embossed a piece of white cardstock and cut out a panel that was 4 inches by 5 1/4. I'm going to adhere that to my card base. And then you can see I already colored in my images here. I cut out 2 leaf flourishes, 2 flower buds, and then 1 flower. And again, I just use my Distress inks to color those in. Now, I die cut out a little frame here. Hindsight, I would have made my frame a little bit longer, maybe doubled up on them, because I end up covering up most of my frame. But I'm just adding the leaves to the top right and bottom left of this little frame. And then I did flip it over. I'm going to add some foam tape behind it and add it to my card base. Okay, next we're going to stamp our sentiment on some vellum. So I went over the vellum with my anti-static powder tool. And for this sentiment, I chose You Are Beautiful to Me. I'm stamping this with my watermark ink, and then I'm going to go over it with some gold embossing powder. I'll go ahead and melt this. And I wanted to tuck this, since I want to pop up my flowers, I wanted to tuck this underneath the flower, but my strip was too wide, so I ended up trimming it down just a little bit. I'm going to add a little tape behind my flower here and add my sentiment, and then I'm just going to angle off that right side Now we're going to flip it over and I can add some foam tape behind my flower. This is a good way to add dimension to vellum. I'm just going to position all my flowers around my little window frame. And after I got it done, you could see I covered up most of my frame. Maybe just one flower would have looked really pretty, but I did add those other little rosebuds. Okay, for bells and whistles, we're going to add some of our little gems here. We're going to add just a few around our little scene. It's hard to see that embossed background, but it really does make a difference. The gems that I'm using are from Nuvo. These are new to me. I just picked them up and they're super pretty. They're called crystal gems, and I believe these are the clear ones. But I really like these. These are real pretty. But that finishes off that card. Okay, you can see the detail in my close-up picture here. Okay, for card number 9, we're going to use the Yupo paper. And I tried to color in my flower to coordinate with the Yupo paper. So I used some blue inks and also some Seedless Preserves Distress ink to color in my images. Just to get as close as I could to that Yupo paper. Now this Yupo paper is the one that I used with a Tim Holtz glitter sparkle glitter alcohol ink paper. It's super pretty. But I just cut it out with some MFT dice. These are elegant rectangle stacks, and I cut out a white frame to go behind it, or a white I matted it on one size larger. I popped that up with some foam tape and placed that in the center of my card base. Now I'm going to add some foam squares behind my floral images, my leaf, and then my little flower bed. And I thought we'd bring in a little extra detail, so I'm going to bring in some real thin wire. I know last time I used this, you guys asked the gauge of the wire, but it's really thin, and the label came off of it, so I'm not sure what the gauge of the wire is. But I believe I picked this up on Amazon. But it's nice gold wire that's easy to manipulate. I just created a little cluster with it and secured it to my panel with the foam squares that I use for my flowers. Next, I'm going to add my little leaf and then also my little flower bed. For my sentiment, I stamped the word Adore You that came in the stamp set, and then I heat embossed it with gold embossing powder. And then all I'm going to do is take one of the crystal gems and place it in the center of my flower. And I think this card was simple and elegant, but so pretty. I love the colors. And that finishes card number 9. Okay, and the Yupo paper that I did here, I created in part 1 of my 10 card 1 kit. Okay, for card number 10, I have 2 pieces of pattern paper here. The green solid pattern paper and then the one with leaves on it. I'm going to attach a little border right next to the leaf pattern. And then this is going to go directly on my card base. I'm going to offset it a little bit to the right. I'm going to go ahead and tape this down to my paper trimmer because I added tape behind it. It was a hindsight. I decided to flip this over and add some foam tape instead of just taping it directly to my card base. So here we go, adding some foam tape, and then we'll just add this, offsetting it a little bit on our card base. Okay, once we have this done, I'm going to bring in a die from Simon Says Stamp. I've had this for a while, but it's so pretty. It's the Heart of Roses die, and it's going to cut out a real pretty heart. I'm going to cut it out with gold cardstock, and then I did fussy cut out my leaf flourish and then painted it with, again, some distress inks. I did stamp it with my watermark ink, and then I added gold embossing powder to that. I did that to all my images for all 10 cards, guys. Okay, my little heart was sliding all around my panel, so I glued it down, and I'm going to secure it with a block until it dries. Now for my sentiment, I'm going to stamp the sentiment in the stamp set that says "Love Everything About You." I'll stamp that with my watermark ink and then go over this again with gold embossing powder. Using my heat gun, we'll go ahead and melt that. And the block letter that says love, again, you can color in the inside. So I'm going to take a green Copic marker and color in the word love. After that's colored in, I'll just use my paper trimmer and we're going to block this sentiment off. So it's a little rectangle. Okay, I'm going to add my little leaf flourish and then also my sentiment to my heart. I added a piece of foam tape. We'll stick that down to our leaf flourish and then we're going to pick the entire leaf and sentiment up. I'm going to add one more piece of foam tape behind my sentiment and then add some foam squares behind my leaf flourish. This way it's nice and even. But I have a little bit of dimension here. I think this card turned out so pretty. I think the gold with those soft green tones looks just stunning. Okay, for bells and whistles, we're going to bring in some Nuvo glitter drops. This is Golden Sunset, I think. I'm not sure. I'll list it down below for you, but it's a real pretty gold. I just added dots here and there, and that finishes off card number 10. So now we get a look at the first 5 cards, or the second cards first. We're going to look at all 5 cards we made today. So pretty. I think the stamp set was gorgeous. The kit was lovely. I have a little bit of trouble with the Yupo paper and the alcohol pearl inks, but I think they turned out real pretty. These are the next 5 that I created for part 1. And again, it'll be listed at the end of the video if you want to check it out and you missed it. But I think the florals in this month's kit are just stunning. Okay, thank you so much for joining me, guys. I wish you a happy Mother's Day weekend. Happy Mother's Day to you all. Have a great day. Thanks so much for stopping by. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.